Hi, in this video, I'm going to show you how to create a full stack Next.js application and host it on Cloudflare. This is connected to Turso database. If I was to test it, test one, we'll add an item to our database. If I click submit, you can see that this item is added to our database. As you can see, I have a database in Turso, and this is where the message is being posted. If I say new message, that message gets added. And now if I go to my database, this will refresh. Throughout this video, I encountered a lot of errors. I have decided not to filter them out, and I've actually kept them in my video. That is to help you see how it actually is to build a simple full stack application and any errors that you might encounter as well. If you prefer having videos like this, then please let me know in the comments. Otherwise, if you just want to have simple, clean videos where I actually skip the errors and show you how the application is built, then please let me know about that as well. Other than that, let's get started. Let's start by creating an empty Next.js project. For that, you do an npx create next app at latest. Let's name this next full stack Cloudflare. We'll use TypeScript, ESLint, Tailwind, no source directory, app router, yes, and no specific import. Then we just wait for this to be installed. Perfect. Once all the dependencies are installed, let's clear this and let's actually go into our project and open it in VS Code. Open the page. And let me actually set everything up here properly so you guys can see. And let's just remove everything here. Save. And let me also remove everything in here. And let's just add a simple hello world. Also go into the styling and let's just remove everything here as well. Nice. Now we should have a simple hello world. So let's actually run this application locally. I'm going to go into my terminal, create a new window and do npm run dev. Now that the dev server has started, if we go to localhost 3000. And there we go. We have a simple hello world. Let me just zoom that in because it's quite small. So from here on, we can start building our application. Let's build some of the front end. I will be using Shadcn. And let's see how to get started here. Installation Next.js. Let's just follow this step by step. We've already created the project and we just need to install Shadcn. Copy the npm command, go to your terminal and paste it. This will initialize Shadcn in our project. Let's just go with default, slate, CSS variables for colors, and let's go with no for now. Nice, project is initialized. Now, if we go to our project, we actually see that a bunch of stuff here has been configured. Some stuff has been added to our Tailwind config. Packages have been installed, and there's a new file that's created for component.json. And there's also utils.ts also created. So now that Shadcn is initialized, let's add the components that we need. Go back to the browser. In here, I'm going to search input. That is a component that we need, and it's just a simple input component. To install it, let's just copy the npm command and again go back to the terminal and paste it. Nice, the input command works. So if we go back to our editor once again, we can see that there's a new components folder, and inside the components folder we have the input tsx file. Just like input, we also need another component, and that is the button. I'm going to do the exact same thing with the button component. Go back to the terminal, paste the button command. There we go. Now we have a button component as well. We have two components to work with, so let's start building. Go back to the editor, but instead of this hello world, we're going to have an input component, the input component that we installed, and import it from the components UI folder, which is here. I'm going to select that. Let's just add a placeholder value in it. This is my input component. And just like the input component, we also will add our button component here, button, and again, import it from the components UI button directory. And let's call it submit. Save this. And now if I go back to my browser in my dev server, we can see that there's a input and button here. Let me style this a bit so it's not too weird to look at. Go into class name and we'll do max width 2XL and we'll flex column, justify center, and items center. Save this. Let's see what it looks like. Let's remove the items center. And there we go. I want this to be in the middle. I'll put these two in a div, and in here, I'll do this. Remove the space here. Nice. Let's do a margin of auto. Let's see what this looks like. Nice. And let's add a padding, a bunch of padding on the side. Let's do padding 10 everywhere, just so it's in a good place. Nice. Another thing that's left is add a bit of gap here. Gap of 3. Be okay. Nice. Now we have an input component and a button component. We can type into it. Separately, we want to display messages that come from our database. So let's just add an example here. This will be an unordered list. We'll display them as bullet points. This is the first message. This is the second message. And this is the third message. Let's see what this looks like. Nice, but I want it to have some padding. Let's add a bunch of padding. Okay, this should be okay for now. So I want to add a message here. That message gets sent to our database, and then I'm going to show those messages here. Let's just commit these changes. I'm going to say initialized project. Nice. I'm going to close this file. The next thing that we'll do is we'll start with Turso, create a database, and then connect that database to our project. So go to your browser, open up a new tab, and search for Turso database. And log in. I'm going to sign in with my Google account. Once you're logged in, go to database and let's create a new database here. I'm going to call this database Next Fullstack Cloudflare, and London is my nearest region. So I'm going to select create database and wait for this to create your database. Once the database is created, you'll land on this page. And as you can see, our database is created. I'm going to click on this database and we have a URL. And then we're also going to generate a token that we are going to use as environment variables in our project. So first of all, let's just copy our link, copy that and go back to your project. And here, create a new file for your environment variables. I'm going to call it env.local, and I'm going to call this database URL is equal to the link that I just copied. Save this. Now, just like this, we're also going to add a database token. So go back to the browser and over here, click on generate token. I don't want this token to ever expire, and I want to be able to read and write. So I'm going to press generate token. Make sure to keep this database token as a secret and don't let anyone see it. I'm only showing you this because of tutorial purposes. I'm going to delete this database after this video anyway. So go ahead and copy and go back to your project. And here I'm going to put database underscore token. And that is equal to our copied token. Make sure you don't add anything new to it and copy it as they've shown you. Nice. We've added our database URL and our database token. We're going to use these in our project. Go ahead and close this file. Now that we've created a database, we're going to use Drizzle to communicate with our database. So let's integrate Drizzle into our Next.js project. Go to your browser. I'm going to click done here and open up a new tab and search for Drizzle Turso and click on the second link, Drizzle with Turso. And we're going to use this guide to integrate Drizzle. We have already created a new database and we've already created an auth token and we've added them to our environment variables. The next step that we need to do is actually install these dependencies. So copy this command, go back to your terminal and paste it. So we're installing Drizzle ORM and libsql client. Press enter and wait for these to be installed. Once this is installed, go back to the browser and let's do the same with the next one. This time we're installing Drizzle kit and wait for this to be installed. Nice, we've installed all the dependencies. Clear the terminal and let's go back to the browser to see what the next step is. As you can see here, we're actually going to create a db and db.ts file where we're going to initialize our Drizzle client. So copy this and let's go back to our editor. In our app folder, we're going to create a new folder called db. And inside that folder, we're going to create a file db.ts. And in here, we will paste the code. In here, we're initializing our Drizzle client just like this. But one thing to fix here is actually these environment variables. We called Turso connection URL database underscore URL. Turso auth token, we called, let's just check. Yeah, we called it database underscore token. So go back to the db.ts file and we're gonna replace Turso auth with database underscore token. Now that we've done this, let's go back to the browser and see what the next step is. After we've done that, we're gonna create a drizzle.config.ts file and add this code inside it. Okay, so create a new file, drizzle.config.ts. And in here, paste our code. What we are going to change here though is our path for the schema file. This path is going to be instead of source, we're going to have app and then db and then schema.ts. The migrations files will be created in a migrations folder, that's fine. The driver is Turso. And again, let's change these variables. The first one is database underscore URL. And the second one is going to be database underscore token. Save this. And let's also at the same time, just so we don't forget, create a schema.ts file in our db folder. Schema.ts. This will be our schema file. Gonna close this. And now let's see what the next step is. Just to make sure that everything is working fine so far, just go back to the browser, go to your local host and refresh it. Seems like everything is working fine at the moment. Everything is compiling. So let's go and see what the next step is going to be. As you can see, now we are actually going to create a schema for our database. And this will be the schema, but we're not going to have the schema. We're actually going to have a very simple schema for our database. I'm going to copy this, go back to our editor, and let's close these files because we don't need them at the moment. And let's open our schema.ts file that we created and paste everything here. Most of the stuff here will go. We don't actually need it. I'm going to delete this and I'm going to change the users to messages and we'll have an ID. And instead of name, we'll do message. And the name of the column is going to be messages or message, and it can't be null. And that's it. We're going to have a database table where we'll have an ID and a message column. I'm going to delete the comment at the top. This is how simple our table is going to be, because this is just a demonstration of how to connect Next.js with Turso and deploy it on Cloudflare. You can make these tables as complex or as simple as you want for your specific application, but this project is just going to show you how to have a Next.js project with Turso database and deploy it on Cloudflare. So once we've created our schema, let's see what the next step is. I'm going to close this file, go back to the browser, and now we're actually going to apply the schema to our database. And this is the command to generate our schema. So I'm going to copy this, go back to the terminal, and in here, I'm going to paste it. This will generate our SQLite schema. As you can see, we're seeing an error. So let's just investigate what this error is. It's saying that it can't find .env config. I don't think we've actually installed this, so that's good that the error came. Let's just install it. I'm going to do npm install .env. Nice, that's installed. Now let's try the command again. npx drizzle kit generate SQLite. And there we go. Our schema is successfully generated. Now, if I go to the project once again, go to our editor and go to this migrations, there we go. We can see that a schema for our database is created. Now that a schema is created, we're actually going to push it to our database. But just let's go to the browser and see what the next step is. Yep, it's showing you an example of what the schema might look like. Now we're actually just going to push it to our database. So I'm going to copy this command, go back to the terminal, layer this, and I'm going to paste it. This will push our schema to our remote database. We're seeing an error that URL is required. Let's check our Drizzle config, and we are giving a URL here. So let's just make sure that database URL. Yep, this matches. I think I know what the issue is. We're not actually, the .env config is not actually working properly. So we're going to delete that and let's actually set it up ourselves. So we're going to import everything as .env from .env package. And then we're going to configure it as the path of our file, which is .env.local. So .env.local, save that. And now we should successfully be able to push our schema up to our remote database. Go back to the terminal, layer this, and let's try that command again. npx drizzle kit push SQLite. Press enter, and awesome, it was that simple. Now this means our schema has been pushed to our remote database. So go back to the browser, and now actually let's go to our database. And if we click on edit tables, we have a table called users that's been pushed to our remote database that has an ID and a message. Let's actually confirm in our schema file. There we go. I changed the name of the variable, but I didn't actually change the name of the database. So now I'm going to actually show you how to update our schema and push that up. So if I change this schema, change this to messages, save this, and now we're gonna generate and push our schema once again. Go back to the terminal, layer this, and let me find the, let's try the npx drizzle kit generate SQLite command again to generate our new schema. Press enter. And there we go. It's actually going to tell you messages table created or renamed from another table. We're actually going to say that this is a rename. And it actually generated our new SQL schema in this file. Now that our schema is generated, let's now push it up again. npx drizzle kit push SQLite. Press enter. And it's actually just select rename table again. And there we go, changes applied. If I go back to my browser again and I refresh this, it says no such table exists users because we actually renamed it. So go back, click on edit tables again, and there we go. Now our table is actually called messages, which was the initial intent. So now we have successfully connected a database to our Next.js project. The next step is going to be sending a message, adding a message in our messages table in our database from the input. So let's start with that. I'm going to close all these files. Let's just save all these changes as well. Going to open the Git section of VS Code, add all of these, and message will be initialized. So Drizzle. Nice. Go back to the file tree. I'm going to close all these. Now let's actually start and create a function that will add the message to our database. In our project folder, I'm going to create a new folder called actions. And in here, create a file called add message to database.ts. And this is going to be server actions. So at the top of the file, put use server. And let's create an export async function, add message to database. This will take in an input that is a string. And for now, let's just console log it. Console.log input, save this. And let's go to our app, our home page. In here now, we need to actually change up some stuff. Because we need to store the message in a use state, we need to have this section in a separate file that is going to need use client at the top of the file. So in our components folder, create a new file called, let's call it message form.tsx, even though it's not really a form. And at the top, put use client, export default function, message form, and we're going to return exactly what we had just created at the beginning. So I'm going to actually cut this and paste it here. Let's import the input in here from our UI, and same for the button as well. Save this. Let's actually import our message form here. To work on our message form, we need to store the input from the input field in a state and then send that state in our async function, add message to database. Let's call this database. So over here, let's have a use state, message, set message, and initially import that React, and the initial value is going to be an empty string. So in the input component, as an on change prompt, let's actually change the input of this state. Whenever a change happens, we're going to set the message to event.target.value. Save this, and the value of this component is going to be the message. So now our input component is actually connected to our state, which is good. And for our button, on click, we're actually gonna add this message. So this is gonna run the function add message to database, and it's going to pass in the message. Nice. Let's also change the placeholder of our input. So I'm going to change this to add a message. There we go. Now, most of this stuff is connected. If I go here, we'll see that if an input is passed, whenever this function is called, we will console log the input. Input is the input passed from input component. I'm going to save this, and let's actually go to the browser and test this functionality. We will see this message being printed in our terminal. So if I go to my browser and go here, refresh this just to make sure everything is working. And in our terminal, go to where your server is running. Nice, seems like everything is working fine. And now if I say, this is a new message from input component, and if I click submit, I should see the output in my terminal. Submit, nice, and there we go. This is a new message from input component, is the past input. So everything is working. Let's actually improve the functionality a little bit because I don't want it to be too bare bones, right? So whenever we press submit, and if everything's successful, I just wanted to clear this message. So let's actually change some functionality. And in here, I'm going to create a new function called, it's going to be async function called handle add message to database. Nice. Let's do const response is equal to await add message to database, and pass in this will pass in the message. Nice. And if everything is fine, I wanted to if response.ok, then I wanted to set message to an empty string. Nice. And over here, I'm going to change everything and just add handle add message to database. There we go. TypeScript is actually complaining because we're not actually returning anything. So here, let's go back to our function and return okay is true for now. Now everything is good. Awesome. Let's try this again. This is a new message. This is a second message. Submit this. And as you can see, this clears up. And if I go to my terminal, we can successfully see this is a second message being posted. Awesome. Our next step is actually improving this function in our add message to database. And instead of console logging it, let's actually insert it into our database. So for that, it's very simple because we are using Drizzle. We do const response is equal to await, and we're gonna use this DB from our db.ts. So we're going to do DB. As you can see, it's importing it from app db dot going to be insert And this insert is going to be in our messages table. As you can see, it's going to import the messages from our schema file, and the values is going to be message is the input. Awesome. Look how simple that is with Drizzle. It's actually really insane that how easy Drizzle makes communicating with the database. Now, let's actually put this in a try catch. If response is okay, then we will return the object okay. However, if there's an error, we will catch it and we will return okay is equal to false. Okay? And we can also do all sorts of error handling, but for now, let's just console log the error. Instead of checking the response here, we don't actually need to do this here. We can just try to add the database. And if anything bad happens, it's going to catch it and then return false. Otherwise, if everything goes smoothly, then that means everything is okay. So we'll just do okay is equal to true right at the bottom. And now everything should be okay. So let's test this functionality. Go back to your local host and let's try to add a message. If we add a message now, it will go to our database. So let me just make sure. I'm going to refresh this in our database, in our messages table. This is the first message. Okay, I'm going to submit this. And as you can see, that wasn't instant because something actually happened. So this means the message is successfully added to our database. And now if I come to my database and press refresh, awesome. We can see the message is actually successfully added into our database, which is great, which means everything is working perfectly fine. That's awesome. Now that this is working fine, let me close this. Let's add another function where we actually fetch everything from our database. So create a new file. I'm going to call this file get messages from database.ts. And again, at the top, put use server. And let's export this function. It's going to be an async function. And let's call it get messages from database. This function is going to be very simple again because of Drizzle. We're going to do const response is equal to await db. db is coming from our app db file here. Again, same as the function before. db.select. Oh, I didn't actually import it. db imported. Then select from, and here we insert the table. The table is going to be messages. That is it for now. And we can return response. If I hover on the response, you can see that it's going to be an array of ID and messages, which is exactly our table. Nice. Let's close this file and let's now go back to our app, our home page. And in here, we need to do one thing. This is now, because we're going to do some data fetching in here, we need to say async before we actually define the function. So const messages is equal to get messages from database. Nice. And if I hover on this, you can see that it's showing me the messages from the database. And now we can actually replace this dummy data. At the bottom, do messages.map. Oh, I need to actually put await in front of it. Yeah, and now we don't need this. Messages.map. And for each message, we are just going to return a list item, an li of message.message. TypeScript is complaining because we actually need to add a key, and the key can be message.id. Now we can actually delete this. And awesome, now everything is working. This is such a bare bones example, but the fact that it works, that's all I want to show here. I'm going to delete all the inputs that we're not using. And if I go back to my browser again, refresh this, you can see this is the first message is actually coming from our database. Let's add another message. Now, adding another message won't actually refresh it here. That is because we're missing one other thing. So if I go back to my code base and open the message form that we created, if the response is okay, then we also want to revalidate the home page. This, as you can see, this function allows you to purge cache data on demand for a specific path. Let's see if this works as expected. I'm going to save this. And now I'm going to say this is the second message and add that to our database. And then hopefully this will also refetch data on the home page on this path. So I'm going to press submit. An error has occurred. Let's see what the error actually is. Let's just first check. We can see that the message is successfully being added, but we need to refresh this page. I think I'm certain the error has to be with the revalidation. There are various ways of reloading or refetching this data. It seems that there's an error with revalidate path. I don't think it's working as expected, or I'm not fully sure how this works. So I'm actually just not going to use this. And I'm actually going to go with a very simple solution. And that is just, I'm going to reload the page. Now, I am only doing this for now, but there are many other ways to refetch data on the home page. But in this example, I just want to show how to connect with the database in a Next.js application and have full stack functionality while also being deployed on Cloudflare. If response is okay, then I'm going to set message to, this doesn't really now have any impact because we're going to reload our page anyway. So if response is okay, then reload the page. And if we reload the page, we'll fetch all this data again. So I'm going to again, now this is another message. Press submit on this. Oh, we're not actually doing anything here. That's interesting. But we can see that we're actually adding the message into our database. So let's debug that. So I actually realized what was happening with this. The thing that was happening is that Next.js is actually caching the response from the server action, which is why we are not even refreshing the page, is not fetching the data again. So we're actually going to create a fix. Instead of this solution of reloading the page, we're not going to do this anymore. We're actually going to stick with setting the message to an empty string and delete this. But what we're going to do is every time we add a message, we're also going to revalidate. And that is how actually revalidate path works. So await db.insert messages, the input into our database. This is in the add message to database file. And then you just do revalidate path. And there we go. That's how easy it is to use revalidate path. Now to show you again, if I come here and add a new message for new message, and submit this. Submitting this will add it to our database and also revalidate this path. So submit, and there we go. It finally works. And this is a simple functionality. It's for second message. Awesome. This is all working as expected. And the next step is going to be deploying this on Cloudflare. To check if most of Cloudflare functionality is working properly, we only need to make one small change here in our homepage, because that's the only page we have. We just do export const runtime is equal to edge. I misspelled runtime. And once we add this, if the homepage loads fine, which I don't think it will because we need to make a small change, then our application is working perfectly. And there we go. Can't resolve path. I know why this is happening. Is because we are using the .env config and path is not actually available on the edge runtime. So the only thing that we need to do is come to our database and db.ts file and import and remove this .env import. If I remove that and save the file, you can see that everything is working fine. Orb.io. Yep, see, everything is working as is. So now our application is just fully ready to be deployed on Cloudflare. What I'm going to do is I'm going to save all these changes, added message functionality with database, and commit this. Awesome. The best way to deploy an application on Cloudflare is through a Git repository. And currently we don't actually have this Git repository remote. So that is what I'm going to do next. I'm going to come back to our terminal here and let me go to my browser, go to your GitHub account and let's add this repository there. Once you are on your GitHub account, let's actually create a new repository. I'm going to create a new repository, call it Next Fullstack Cloudflare, and create this repository. Let's keep it public so you can view it as well. And now let's connect our local repository to this remote repository. And for that, we just need to copy these commands. Git remote add origin to this link. So go back to the terminal and paste it. There we go. And the next command is checking out if we're on main. We are already on main. And then git push -u origin main. Paste that here. And now we have pushed our local repository onto our GitHub repository. So if I go back to the browser now, refresh this page, you can see that this repository is added in our GitHub account. The next step is using this repository and deploying our application on Cloudflare. So go to Cloudflare. I'm going to search for Cloudflare here and click on Cloudflare. Let me zoom in and let's log in. Log in with your Cloudflare account. Once you have logged in with your Cloudflare account, let me zoom in. You want to scroll down to workers and pages and click on create application. And then we're going to select pages and connect to Git. I'm going to click on that. I had already connected it, but if you haven't, then you would add an account here and then you'll connect your Git repository. I want to select the next full stack Cloudflare repository that I just created. I will select that and begin setup. Then I'll keep the name as is, branch as is, and framework preset. I'll select Next.js. And I forgot to install the Cloudflare Next on Pages dependency that we need to build our application for Cloudflare. So I'll just do that now. I'll copy at Cloudflare Next on Pages, go to my terminal, npm install -d and paste at Cloudflare Next on Pages. I'll enter this. Nice, this is added. Now I need to commit this and then push this up again. So I'm back to my editor. I'll add these and added Cloudflare next on pages. I'll push this up. Nice, that should be okay. So go back to the browser, come back to Cloudflare here, and this all seems okay. Environment variables. We actually added 2 environment variables. So let's add the first one. Go back to the editor, open up your env local file, and let's actually add these variables in. So copy the first one and add it, the database URL, and let's copy the second one and add that as well. Save and deploy. Now it's going to connect to our repository and try and build the application. It's going to get the latest commit. Oh, looks like something has gone wrong. And I know what the issue is here as well. Okay, we don't have Wrangler, which is what Cloudflare needs, and Vercel installed. So what we're going to do is go back to our terminal, npm install -d Wrangler, and let's install Vercel as well. Let's install these and push it up. Wait for these to be installed, then we will commit these and push it to our remote repository. Awesome, these are installed. Go back to our editor, close this file, and let's commit the 2 changes. As you can see, Vercel and Wrangler have been installed. Installed Vercel Wrangler. Don't worry, this installing the Vercel package does not mean that we are actually using Vercel to deploy our application. We're still hosting everything on Cloudflare. So I'm going to close this, go back to the browser, and instead of retry deployment, I actually want to retry with the latest thing. So let's click on continue project. That's fine. Let's continue. And now we can see that because we have pushed our changes up, the next deployment is already in progress. So view details. And let's see if our application is building fine this time. And nice, we can see that our application is actually building fine. Awesome, everything is generated. Wait for this deployment to be complete. Nice, our site was deployed. Now if I go on the link of our application, it won't actually work. There's a tiny step that we need to add in our application for it to work. So if I click on our project, you can see that Cloudflare actually helps us recognize what the error is. Cloudflare wants us to add the Node.js compact flag in our application. So we'll just copy this, go back to your account, in your project, go to settings, and it's not in builds and deployments, it should be in functions. And there's compatibility date, and then there is compatibility flags. And inside here, we want to add the compatibility flags. So I'll just paste the Node.js compat flag here. Save this, and for our preview as well, just save it as well, add it and save it. And awesome, that's all we need to do. Now come back to deployments and retry this deployment again. And we're so close to finishing. Wait for this deployment to be complete, and now everything should work as expected. Nice. Once you see this success message, that means your latest deployment has gone in. So now if I come back to my site and refresh, you can see that our site is working perfectly fine. Now if I add a message, this should work normal. And now our application is fully deployed. So site is deployed to Cloudflare. Oh, I think there's an error. Okay. So I found out what the issue is. The issue is pretty much with the package itself, because as you can see, if I press submit here, it says 404 for not found. That means the package is doing something where it can't find our post, our adding function, our adding server action, but it's successfully able to locate the get server action where we get the messages. So this is actually something to do with the package that is not building our application properly. So in this case, what I know to do is to just use a previous version of the Wrangler and the next on pages package that will allow us to build our application properly. So in this case, what you have to do is go back to the code base. Let's go into our package JSON. And in here, we're going to change 3 packages that help us build our application. And that is Cloudflare Next on Pages, Vercel, and Wrangler. So for Cloudflare Next on Pages, we're going to change this to 1.10.0. That is the version that we're going to use. And for Vercel, we're actually going to use 33.5.5. And for Wrangler, we're going to use 3.32.0. 3.32.0. And these are the versions that we're going to use. This will actually help us build our application properly, and we won't see that error anymore. Changed packaged versions, commit this. And now let's sync it up. Let's push it to our remote repository. We've changed the packages here, but then we also need to do npm install. So in your terminal, run npm install. Nice. And now if you can see that the package log JSON has also changed. Now it's actually using all these packages. So updated package log JSON. I commit this and now push this up to the remote repository as well. Let's go and now check our deployments again. As you can see, another deployment is already starting. And if I look at details, hopefully this should build as expected. Wait for this to build. And after this, our application should work as expected, hopefully. Once the deployment is complete, once again, we're seeing the success message. Now let's go to our project. I'm going to close this, refresh the page. As you can see, everything is working fine. I'm going to backspace this. And now let's try our test again. I'm going to add a message and submit it. It should hopefully add it to our database and revalidate this page. So site was deployed to Cloudflare, submit, and there we go. As you can see, it's finally working and it's working as expected. Now, if I go to my database, refresh, server error, but let's just go on the tables again, click on messages, and now we can see our messages. Refresh, you can see the site was deployed to Cloudflare and video is finishing. Submit that. You can see that's also added, refresh that, and we can see that in our database. And this shows you and now everything is working as expected. This shows you how you can have a Next.js application deployed on Cloudflare that is connected to a database. Now you can pretty much build whatever you want that is full stack connected to a database and that's hosted on Cloudflare. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this helpful. If there is anything that you want me to make a video about, please let me know. Bye.